Hello, everybody, and welcome to our PACE webinar on Introduction to Organizational Excellence and Real-Time Assessment. It's my great pleasure today to have as our speaker, Dawn Ringrose. Dawn's Principal of Organizational Excellence Specialist, and she's author of the Organizational Excellence Framework publication and a company toolkit. She's been involved in this since 1984. She's consulted to management in areas that have positively contributed to organizational performance. She's worked with organizations across the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Just a tremendous amount of experience in this area. And several of these organizations that she's worked with have been recognized by National Excellence Award programs. So she brings with her today a wealth of knowledge, and if you're like me, you're excited to hear what she has to say. So we are recording this session today, just FYI. If you have questions, we'll attempt to answer them as we go along. So feel free to put them in the chat feature and I'll ask them. We'll also have time at the end for Q&A, so hopefully we'll have a lively session there. If we don't get to all the questions, we'll answer them offline. So without further ado, take it away, Dawn.
Thank you very much, Rafe. I'm pleased to be here, and I look forward to sharing some of this work that we've been doing over the last number of years. It's a study that's been going on since 2015, and it's been absolutely fascinating. We've been capturing the current state of excellence around the world by organization size, industry sector, and region. Some countries have been high responding, so we can even take a good look at the profile by country. So as I'm bringing my presentation up, what I'm going to do is I'll start off by asking everybody to put in the chat what country they're located in. And myself, I'm here on Vancouver Island on the western coast of Canada. So it'll be very interesting to see where everybody's located. So what kind of responses have we got there coming in? I can't see the chat right now, so I'll have to depend on Rafe for that.
Rafe, you're on mute.
I know in the list of attendees, there was an indication that we've got a lot of professionals from all sorts of different countries, and I think that's fantastic.
Well,
I think that'll make for a good conversation.
And we do. It's all over. We have lots from the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, with greetings from India, Spain. So we have truly a global attendance today.
Well, fantastic. Welcome, everybody. And I'll go through my presentation and we'll open it up for questions and discussion. I'm sure that everybody's got some very valuable input. So with that, let me proceed. Today, I'm going to talk about this integrated excellence model that I've developed in an automated assessment tool. So you've got a little bit of an idea of the background on the model and the way we do the assessment. We'll appreciate the aggregate results that have come in so far and consider how we can use these results to our advantage. I really think, regardless of profession or organization size or type, your location, there's something in it for you. So it'll be fun to discuss that. And we'll also finish off the presentation with understanding how this work that we do in excellence can improve organizational performance and in turn contribute to your local economy, trade, and it all trickles into resident quality of life. And this is one of the more exciting features of this sort of work, and it's the sort of thing that is of great interest to myself. So I'm pleased to share that with you. So first of all, I have another question for you. How many of you are familiar with excellence models? You just type in the chat, yes or no. We'll get a feel for the level of awareness that we have here in this group today. I'll tell you, the global research tells us that only 20% of the working population is familiar with excellence models. But we may have a group online here today that has greater familiarity. It'll be interesting to see. So when we have a sense of that, perhaps, Rafe, you can let me know what the group is saying.
Okay, well, it looks like about 80% say no, 20% say yes, and one person says, I'm a certified assessor. So,
Excellent.
yes, so it's a bit of a range.
Well, fantastic. I mean, it's very interesting that our audience kind of parallels what the global research tells us, but then we've got some real experts in the group. So that's just fantastic. So let me just say that this work that I've been doing in organizational excellence, I found it absolutely fascinating. I mean, I first discovered these excellence models when they were being introduced in the late 80s, early 1990s. And over time, the work I've done and the research that I've read, it just has spoken very loudly about the fact that these models offer a formula for success that's been validated by decades of research now. And the formula goes like this. You work with an organization to implement the practices in the model. You develop a culture committed to excellence, one where everyone in the organization is saying, what are we doing now? How can we do it better? And then you go on to achieve exceptional results across a balanced system of measurement. And so things like good governance, trust in leadership, delighted customers, satisfied employees, ever improving work processes, great relationships with suppliers and partners, wonderful management of resources, financial results. So it's pretty tempting. And I never get tired of reading all the wonderful stories about organizations that do this and get wonderful results. So what I did was I took a look over the years I've been practicing in this area. And back in 2010, I thought to myself, I want to combine all this good work that's been done in research and identifying the principles and practices common to high-performing organizations. And I wanted to put that all together because the models that we have out there are very similar, but they do have some unique features. And some of those models, you may have heard of them, EFQM, Malcolm Baldrige, the Baldrige model, there's the Canadian model, the Australian model. Those are the 4 models that first got all this started way back when. And now, there's probably 80 countries in the world that are using various combinations of these things. But I thought, I want to put this all in one place, all these definitions of principles and practices. And then I went the extra step because I'm a certified management consultant. I went the extra step of saying, here's some implementation guidelines. Because, that was the most frequently asked question I ever got. And I thought, well, it hadn't been covered in the literature, so why don't we put it all together in one place? And I put this publication on the homepage of the website, and people can download it at no charge. And it's there at no cost because I think more people need to know about this so they can use it to their advantage. And so this is the model that we're using to do the assessment. And it's great because if you're using an excellence model, it'll dovetail nicely with that. And if you're not, then you get a chance when you participate in this to take a look at, well, what are these best practices that high-performing organizations are using? And what are those principles that they live by and the way they work together? So in just a high level, these are the principles that describe a culture that is committed to excellence. And you can look down the list, and I think most of us can, good feel for what all these things are. The only one might be alignment, I'm thinking, and this is where we look for great alignment between the strategic plan, the business plan, the people hired, the work that is being done, the way things are measured, and the reward and recognition that continues to drive the desired results. This is alignment. And we find when organizations are very well aligned that way, there's no waste, that things are moving efficiently and effectively towards a desired aim. And this alignment is a very important principle. Here's the key management areas, and there's 9 of them. And this is where all of the best management practices are. Each one of these areas have a different number of practices, but generally they fall into these areas. And these are areas that we've heard about in business or the work that we do, and that most organizations are quite familiar with. In the last area, continuous improvement and performance measurement, this one's actually broken down into 3 sub areas. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But continuous improvement, we're taking a look at performance measurement by these key management areas, and also performance measurement for the organization as a whole. So it's a good, robust tool. And we've got an automated assessment and reporting tool that we use to do this work. And so we use this to ask respondents to give feedback on the extent to which their organization have the principles in place and the extent to which their organization has deployed the best management practices. And when you take a look at a micro-size organization with 1 to 25 employees, there's about 50 practices that they'd be rating. But a larger size organization, there'd be about 100 practices. So that gives you an idea of how robust the model is. If you compare this, let's say, to an ISO standard 9001, which is the quality standard, there's 25 or 30 kind of practices there. So this gives you an idea that this is a pretty big umbrella under which these other sorts of things fit. So the global research study was launched back in 2015. It was a result of me sitting on this organizational excellence technical committee that's part of the quality management division at ASQ. And there's a number of us that represent various excellence models, sitting around the virtual table, wondering about a project that we could do. And someone suggested that we use my tool to do this sort of study. And so we got the support from several organizations, global organizations, they thought it was a great idea too. And that was ISO Technical Committee 176, which oversees the 9001 standard, the International Academy for Quality, and the Global Benchmarking Network. So that, and combined with ASQ, we had a really good group there that thought, hey, let's go for it and do this very unique study that would be led by my business. And it was something that had never been done before. So it was very exciting. So over time, we've been able to collect close to 3,000 respondents. And this is the data that we've gathered up until the end of 2022. And so there's quite a few more that we have in the system, but we just haven't written a report yet. So I hesitate to report on that until we do. But we've asked those that have been responding to be, from 4 different roles in organizations. They could be staff, management, leadership positions, or could be other position would be, let's say, a board member. And 4 different sizes, as I indicated earlier: micro, small, medium, and large. And that's based on the number of employees. 3 different types: government, business, nonprofit, 21 industry sectors, and 7 regions of the world, which we see here on the screen. And they've each got a different color. So the other thing that was really interesting about the study is that these respondents had varying levels of awareness about excellence. Some had never heard about these excellence models, and others were using them. So we got a really nice cross-section of organizations that have participated. Now, about 70% of those respondents have finished what we call the teaser assessment. And this is the assessment on the principles that describe a culture committed to excellence. And a nice cross-section, by 21 sectors, 7 regions. Important to note that this scale that we use on this one is a bit of a subjective scale. We're asking people for their gut feel on the extent to which the principles are in place. And there's a rating scale that goes from low to high. and in 20% kind of increments. So a scale of 1 to 10. And these are the results so far. You know, you can see that most of these ratings are in kind of the medium high range. Respondents consider that they do have a culture that is committed to excellence, you know, where everyone's striving to do well and serve the organization well, serve the customers well. And we can see high points in terms of the ratings on leadership involvement and focus on the customer, and little ratings that are a little bit lower on those prevention-based process management and database decision making. But overall, these ratings are actually quite good. So we get a feel for this is how respondents are viewing the culture and the degree it's committed to excellence in their organizations. When we take a look at organizations by size, and micro has 1 to 25 employees, small has 26 to 100, medium has 100 to 999, and large has 1,000 plus. And you see that the ratings are actually all quite close. These are aggregate results, mind you. You'll find real different ratings if you drill down into an individual organization or even an industry sector. And where the real gold is in this study is in the open-ended comments. We've probably got about 400 pages of them right now, and it's always fun to go through them. And I'll share a few as I go along in this presentation. Here's a couple comments just from a micro size and a large size organization. And it's always very interesting whether we're doing this sort of study or you're doing this work with an industry sector or an individual organization. These are absolute gold because there's always comments in here that are a surprise to leadership. There's quick wins, things that they can address right away. I hear each and every time I hear them say, oh my goodness sakes, we didn't have any idea that was going on. And it's something we can fix right away. And sometimes these are things that are going to take a little bit more time. But you can just see from these two examples, the strengths that are mentioned or the opportunities for improvement. When we drill down a little deeper into specific industry sectors, and there's 21 sectors, there's only 18 reported here because I don't like to say much about a sector unless we've got at least 25 or more respondents. But most of the ratings are in the medium high kind of area, except for 3 that fell into medium, which were agriculture, public administration, and real estate. And the highest rating was from the professional, scientific, and technical activities sector. And that's where we find accountants and consultants and engineers and these sorts of professions. And the lowest was public administration. And that's, we've been seeing that pretty steadily, you know, in all of the work that we're doing, actually. Some more memorable comments that I'd like to share, and it really gives you a flavor for what's going on in these organizations. And when we take a look by region, you can see these are starting to show some differences too. We've got, you know, some fairly favorable ratings, but a little lower for North America, which really came as a surprise to me that the ratings were lower for North America. So that's Canada and the United States, and a little bit lower for Latin America and the Caribbean as well. But interesting to look at how the respondents are viewing culture and the degree it's committed to excellence in their organizations. And here's just a couple comments from people that are in Europe and Central Asia and Middle East and North Africa. Very interesting to see what they have to say about their culture. Now, the full assessment, so this is where 30% of the respondents are. We've got good coverage here so far, only 786 organizations. But again, we've got good coverage by the 21 industry sectors and 7 regions of the world. And this is where we use a much more objective scale. We ask respondents to consider the extent to which they've deployed these practices in their organization. And in deployment, Are they using a good approach? Is it fully deployed throughout the organization? Are they getting results? Do they have a mindset of continual improvement? So we're looking at this sort of thing. Again, it's a 10-point scale, and the scale is divided into 25% increments. And we use the terms just beginning, good start, doing well, and high performance to differentiate the maturity that the organizations have. And so these are the results so far on the extent to which these practices are in place across the key management areas. And you can see that last area of continuous improvement and performance measurement broken apart into the 3 sub areas, but an overall strength certainly on the customer side of things, and also in measuring the performance organization wide. So those are some real high points. Maybe a little bit of work to do in the planning area and suppliers and partners area.
So we have a question.
Yes.
It might be a little early, but are there any use cases where this model is used for acquiring new customers?
Whether the model is used to acquire new customers?
For acquiring new customers.
Yeah, it's I'll tell you this this model it helps you improve performance so that you're doing well over a balanced system of measurement, just like any excellence model does. And the advantage, I suppose, of this one is that we've integrated the practices from excellence models to date. We've got them all in one place. So it aligns nicely with any other excellence model, but it's a model that has everything in one place along with the implementation guidelines. So an organization using this, certainly if you take a look at the customers area and all the practices there, you focus on those practices and it will be desirable towards that end. But you've really got to appreciate the interrelationships that exist too, because there's practices that influence other practices, and there's the practices that influence the principles as well. So there's these interrelationships that are very, very important. For example, if you're looking at acquiring more customers and having customers at the end of the day saying good things about you in the marketplace and earning that return and referral business, we know that there's relationships, let's say, between employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction or loyalty and financial results or profitability or tendency to refer. So there's these interrelationships that are really important to take note of as well. And that's all identified in the publication that I've written, all of those interrelationships. And there's also a document that you can download on the homepage of the website called Interrelationships, and it shows the touch points between the practices and the principles and what practices influence what principles. So if let's say you've got a low rating on one of the principles, like societal commitment, and you take a look down the list and say, gee, what are the touch points in the practices? And how am I doing on those practices? And you take a look at maybe some of those particular practices of low ratings. Well, there's where you want to focus effort to buoy up that principle. So it's very formulaic. Actually, that's what I love about it. Very formulaic. And it allows you to put these practices in place in general. And it also allows you to take a much deeper dive. And this is a good example where we can work with PACE, because you do a nice deep dive into profitability analytics, for example, and explore the financial performance in much greater detail than we do. But this is an opportunity for professionals to work together, So you've got that general expertise, you've got that deep dive, specialized expertise that you can get working together. So I hope that answers the question. And here's another comment from a medium-sized organization in the human health and social work area. You can see here 2 very different comments about leadership within this organization, giving that organization a tremendous amount of feedback about what they can be doing a little bit better. And here's when we take a look at these key management areas by specific industry sector. When you start drilling down, you can see that the aggregate ratings start to differentiate a little bit more. You can see where the electricity sector is doing quite well on the extent to which they've got these practices deployed. Whereas, well, public administration maybe needs to pull up their socks and do a little bit work, right? Now we're going to take a look at each one of the key management areas and the practices within them. And here's governance. And we can see here that the highest rated practice is that the governance system meets obligations. And these are things like, legal, ethical, reporting obligations. And so it's really good to see that that's one of the higher rated practices. This is the one practice in this governance area that's applicable to micro-size organizations, where the remainder of them are, applicable to small, medium, and large size organizations. This one had an overall rating, average rating of 5.95. And here's some comments about governance from a transportation and storage business in Indonesia. And you can see where there's strengths in this area, but there's some opportunities for improvement that need to be addressed as well. And in the leadership area, quite a few more practices in this particular area, 15 of them in total. And this is an area that had an overall average rating of 5.89. This is where we see our strategic focus, where the organization has a strategic plan that's been developed. They're communicating it to employees and all working together to accomplish what's been set out in terms of that desired future state. And we can see some real strong points in some of the practices here, but we can see the opportunities for improvement in areas like using risk management to assess the goals and objectives, needing to work a little bit more on removing barriers to effectiveness, benchmarking, which is learning from the ideas and practices of others, and of course sharing if you indeed are working with an organization that is quite high performing. It's always good to share with others about what you're doing so they can learn from you too. And here's a comment again from Indonesia about having corporate statements in place and communicated, but interesting comment that the system that they're using should be better understood by senior management. So some work that needs to be done there. Here's the planning area, and this was one of the lower rated areas at 5.5, but they've still got, not bad ratings. A couple of practices are jumping out: contingency plans and capability gap analysis. This is something we see worldwide as being areas that need improvement. And these are the areas that really caught people with the COVID pandemic and the decision to kind of shut the economy down. That really bit a lot of organizations quite hard. But we also see some positive things like using factual information in order to do business planning and making sure that that plan is supporting the strategic direction so that there's good alignment there. This is a memorable comment from municipal government, actually, and they were talking, or federal government rather, and they were looking at the planning area and saying we're good at putting out fires, but they really need to spend an awful lot more time on the planning area. And that's what organizations find when they do this kind of work. What's going well? What needs to improve? Where do we focus effort? And this all makes a big difference for them when they concentrate and focus on those areas where there's some improvement indicated by not only the ratings, but the open-ended comments. And here on the customer side of things, of course, this was a relatively high rated area at 5.7, an area where a lot of organizations are doing, quite well. And we see the high points there in really understanding what the needs and expectations are of the customers and responding successfully to customer feedback. So that's good to see. But some work that should be done maybe into reaffirming presence in the marketplace. Are you still relevant? And training and empowering employees to be real advocates for the customer. Here's another comment from the human health area in Canada about doing their first survey with their customers to get a handle on how their experiences are during COVID at the time, and then the opportunity that they found in reviewing client complaints, because before they did this sort of work, they didn't realize that that was important, to take a look at client complaints and take a look at trends and what's coming out of that. So customer satisfaction, loyalty, these are all very important things, but also in confidence. But where those customer complaints are really important too, because that gives us great guidance and direction. In the employees area, and this is the heartbeat of any organization, organizations are doing quite well in this area too, with an overall average of 5.7. And the high point there of employees sharing their ideas and suggestions, which is fantastic, because this is about 90%, where 90% of improvement will come from. Very, very important to be asking people who are doing the work how to do it better. Also, organizations are putting a lot of emphasis on making sure they have a healthy workplace environment for their employees. Now, areas where organizations could be doing a little bit better, and that is encouraging employees to be innovative and take calculated risks, or removing barriers to effectiveness. Asking that question, what are some of the dumbest things we do? And so here's another comment from the employee side of things. And you can see that in some organizations, people are really lost. They don't hear much about the organization. They don't get a lot of direction, and overall communication is quite poor. So this gives really good feedback to leadership about an area to concentrate on. On the work processes area, and this is so very important, the way we design and document the way that we do our work, and the way we monitor and control and improve. Here we see that organizations are rating quite highly their work in the corrective action area, but they're making sure they have processes to anticipate or address change, maybe rated a little bit lower, and things like involving stakeholders in designing new products and services are an area where they could do a bit better. And then the whole area of benchmarking, which is the 10th practice, using external data to compare performance. This is an area where organizations need to do a little bit more work. And you can see in this comment from this organization in Indonesia that they're strong at change management, but they're looking at that opportunity to do more benchmarking with others, because that's where an awful lot can be learned as well, is looking at high performers and what they're doing. You can learn something from each and every one of them, whether they're in your industry sector or not. There's a wealth of information there. In the suppliers and partners area, here's an area where we see some strength in selecting suppliers and partners on the basis of criteria and developing win-win arrangements, which is fantastic. But I need to do a bit more work in the work that we do with them on developing social and environmental standards. And again, another comment from this area. I like the opportunity on this one, recognizing that talking to suppliers and partners and not just taking a look at what they've got to offer, but what else can we do together that might work really well for the organization. So thinking out of the box a little bit and working on things that'll make a real difference. So, we know high performing organizations have a few really good, strong supplier and partner relationships. They're not spreading themselves too thin. So they're really working closer with their suppliers and partners, because in unison, they're the ones that, if they're working well together, deliver a good end product or service in the marketplace, right? So the customer never knows about any failure or weakness and who it's really attributable to. This is why this area is so important, that we're working with the right organizations to deliver our product or service. And the resource management area, and the resources here are things like our assets, building, equipment, financial assets, technology, the way we manage knowledge, transportation. Let's say we've got a fleet of trucks or what have you. These are all the resources outside of employees, which are the human resources. These are the other resources that are so important to running organizations. And we can see here that organizations are doing quite well in defining what their resource requirements are and managing the security of them. And in the other areas, the ratings are a little bit lower, but overall they're actually doing quite well. So this is good to see in this particular area. And comment in the resource management area again. We can see this organization is doing quite well in this area, but they see the opportunity to do a little bit more work in the way they're allocating their financial resources. And you can dig down deeper, of course, into that to better understand, what they're getting at if you're working closely with them. There's so much information in the open-ended comments, and especially when you take a look at 60% of employees that might be participating in one of these assessments, you can get a real good feel for what's going on in an organization. It's absolutely amazing. It's a treasure trove of information in the open-ended comments. And this is the continuous improvement area. This is where organizations sit back and say, gee, how are we doing in all of these key management areas? What's going well? Where do we need to focus a little bit more effort? And you can see the results are quite positive in the customers area, and maybe a little bit more work might need to be done on the resource management side of things, suppliers and partners. And this is where we have performance measures by key management area. We can see that their organizations are using a fairly balanced system of measurement, and particularly in the customer side of things. And when we take a look at the performance measures that are used for the organization as a whole, we see a little bit more variation here, but there is some strength in measures that are important to micro-size organizations as well as other sizes, and that's the quality of products or services, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and financial performance. It's good to see strength in those four measures because those are important to all sizes of organizations. Now, small, medium, and large size organizations will want to make sure that they have maybe 6 or 8 of these measures that they're monitoring as well, and providing a good balanced system of measurement. But I was very encouraged by this, that in this measurement area that we're seeing a pretty good balanced system of measurement. And a comment by someone in management from Latvia. And interesting here how a company is really exceeding expectations in their financial goals, but they're kind of leaving the employee behind. And so great opportunity there to make sure there's some improvement. So on to leveraging these results. How can we use these results to our advantage?
Can I ask this? There's a question that's been asked, so maybe I can ask you it. Are the results sensitized for culture and maturity of the individual's understanding of the framework?
No, I'll tell you what, when we do these assessments, we're always dealing with all sorts of different organizations and different people within the organizations. And what we find is we're dealing with people who have never heard of excellence models, all the way up to people that are very familiar with excellence models. So there's this great variation, and there's never a problem with people, understanding the statements in the assessment or the rating scales and providing their open-ended comments. So we get really good feedback that way. And these practices and these principles apply to every size and every type of organization, no matter where they're located in the world. So when you take a look at this area of excellence models and the work that's been done around the world, this model brings it all together, and so you don't sensitize it by culture at all. It's just, do you have these principles in place? Does this describe your culture? Have you deployed these best management practices? It's as simple as that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And that this leveraging results, and this is where I think it's really kind of exciting in a lot of ways. There's something that we can all contribute to this effort of improving the performance of organizations from our different area of specialty, or even if we're a generalist, because organizational excellence provides this nice big umbrella under which all these practices fall. And, they apply, like I had said earlier, to any size or type of organization. Really important that leaders and managers know about it so that they can convey this to staff, and everybody can be working together towards a common aim of strengthening the organization. Certainly business advisory professionals that are working with organizations should know about this. And I might say that when I speak to audiences like engineers, accountants, consultants, they're the same as this audience today. Only 20% of the hands go up when I say, who's heard of excellence models? Who's familiar with them? So there's a real huge opportunity here to make sure that the working population in general knows more about what's in these excellence models so they can harness it and put it to work and get some good results. Similarly, with educational institutions, this is really important to have this as part of the curriculum so students learn about it. And similar with industry sector associations, whether industry or professional associations, they should really be conveying this to their membership as well. And of course, you can scale this up to see how a country is doing. You can use this in terms of taking a look at your economy and how to strengthen your economy, the various industry sectors that are important to you, and so forth. So it has a real impact on economic development, potentially. So it's absolutely amazing that you can get, government and the business sector and the nonprofit sector all working together towards strengthening a country. So this offers great opportunity, and there's a role we can all play, because you can be a specialist in the organizational excellence area, or you can lend your expertise to one of these areas. For example, the employees area. This is where someone who works in the human resource field can bring their expertise to the table. And so when you look at the various sections of the model and the practices, you can see where you can play a part. And actually, the formula that we use is pretty easy. When you take a look at putting this in place in an organization, or you get an industry sector to work together, you basically just educate the audience. First of all, you talk about, well, what are your strategic imperatives and what do you want to accomplish? You want to take yourself from your current state to your desired future state. So let's get a handle on that. And then we want to train people about excellence, and you can facilitate an orientation or a training session that could be anywhere from 2 hours to a full day, depending on how in depth you want to get and how much participation there is in terms of feedback. You can do a shorter orientation if you just want to jump right to, let's say, an assessment, online assessment. But once organizations have done the assessment, you can prepare a feedback report. You can say, okay, here's your ratings, here's your open-ended comments, and these practices are low rated. Here's some action-oriented plans to implement those practices. And these are the things you can work on this year, next year, the year after that. And what we really like to do is get leaders in organizations to get all their employees involved, so everybody's got something to do with this action-oriented report. And everybody's involved in strengthening the organization. Now, if that organization needs a little bit of support, some extra training or some consulting services or coaching. Of course, we're there to provide that, but we really believe that it's really important to get the employees involved and they do their good work. And so that way the knowledge resides in the organization, right? And you're not watching it walk out the door if you've been working with a consultant that's been doing it all for you. You really want to get your employees involved, provide support as they need it, and then encourage those leaders to compare how their organization is doing with others against this index, for example. Benchmark with high-performing organizations, learn from those high performers, because in addition to what their employees have to tell them in terms of ideas and suggestions and feedbacks, there's a lot that they can learn from high performers. So all of this good work really does contribute to the economy, trade, and resident quality of life, because when you think about it, a high-performing organization is one that hires more employees, it buys more goods and services, it donates time and money to the community and important causes. In fact, they're really contributing to a stronger local economy, to trade relationships, and all this trickles into the resident quality of life. And if you got quite a few high-performing organizations, it really helps to develop the brand of your country as well, or a particular industry sector. If you're known for being high-performing and trustworthy and dependable in the delivery of your products and services, so it can really have quite an impact. And if we consider this, we scale it up, we think about the work that we can do as having a ripple effect throughout our community, our region, our country. And probably one of the best examples of this is Singapore, who has done a very good job at this and is now on the top of most lists when you take a look at economic indicators and so forth. They're really high performing, and there aren't too many other countries that I can use as examples in this regard. But I must say that I just got back from doing some work in Dubai, and Dubai is really my compliment to them. There is a government that is working on becoming high performing and has been making great strides. And I've been working there since 2017. And every time I return, I see the wonderful strides that they're making. And so when the intention is there, it's absolutely amazing what can happen. It's absolutely thrilling. So with that, let's just open it up to questions and discussion. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so we can have a good discussion about this.
So everyone feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions that you might have. Or if you're a little shy, you put them in the chat and I'll ask them for you. But this is a great opportunity to ask about any questions you have about building a high performance organization, what it's involved. And while we're waiting for some comments, Dawn, perhaps you might want to talk about next steps that we have planned.
Yes. What Rafe and I were discussing is doing a real-time assessment with PACE membership. And I'm really excited by this because you've got members far and wide, and this gives us an opportunity to ask everyone to participate in this assessment. Doesn't matter what size or type of organization, doesn't matter to what extent you know about this area. It gives you a chance to experience the assessment. And in doing that, you'll learn about the principles and practices that are common to high-performing organizations, and it can be quite enlightening. And then the end results give you a chance to see how your organization measures up to others, and how you're doing as a membership. I'm thinking that my prediction is that you actually probably be doing quite well, just given the nature of the work that you're all interested in and doing. It's going to be fascinating. And the most important thing is to be really, really honest when you're doing this, and you're assessing, the degree to which these principles are in place or these practices have been deployed, because That's going to give you a good, honest result about where you're sitting. And then you build on that, because you build on your strengths and you work on addressing your opportunities for improvement. And that's where the real results are that'll be beneficial to you. And when we get those respondents in, we'll schedule another session where I'll come back and I'll report the results, and then we can speak about it.
This is an exciting opportunity to do some benchmarking, right? You had mentioned
Yeah.
an area many organizations fail in or don't do as well, and perhaps, and this is a great opportunity to do that. And as you mentioned, we're looking forward to having you back and examining the results of people on this call and the PACE membership. And again, PACE is really all about enhancing organizational performance. And so this is, what you do is so complementary to what we do as well. So it's exciting here.
It really is. When I look at this area, I always think, assess your organization to see how you measure up to high performing organization. There's so much learning right there. But then, well, gee, how are you doing in comparison to others? Take full advantage of this index that we're developing. And then next step is learning from high performing organizations. And we've got all this good work that's been done around the world by these national excellence bodies that have got award recipients that they recognize for implementing these models and getting exceptional results for at least 3 years running, continually improving results. So we've got this information at our fingertips about high performing organizations, and we can learn from each and every one of them. This really gives you an awful lot of information that you have at your fingertips to make a real difference in your organization.
So we have
Ray,
one. Yeah,
Ray,
go ahead, Gary.
This is Gary.
Go ahead.
I have a question for you, Dawn. What has been a major lesson learned by organizations that have attempted to implement what you've been describing?
Well, I'll tell you what I normally hear. When I'm working with an organization to put this in place, and I'll use the example of an organization that's been up and running for quite a number of years, right? I hear year one, oh boy, our communication is getting a lot better, and we're getting rid of a lot of duplication. And then year two, I hear, wow, is this ever hitting the bottom line? And year three, it's just the way they operate, because they've got most of this in place and they're just humming along. So it's, and we've worked with organizations that have never heard about this sort of thing before. And it's like, well, what is excellence anyway? And it's a similar thing that they experience, in just cleaning things up, getting things running really efficiently and effectively, getting really focused so that everything's really well aligned in the organization and everyone's working towards a common aim. And so those are the sorts of the feedback that we get. And each and every organization is different, because when I think about an organization that we've been doing work with over the years it's a kind of a fabrication outfit. And when they first did this, they said they got feedback from their employees that they didn't know anything about the business plan. Leadership had no idea. And they thought, oh my goodness, well, this is something that we can communicate about right away. It's each and every organization is different, and they have a different profile. When you do an assessment, there's different things they need to work on. And it's not all going to happen tomorrow. We say, do you do this when you're able to do it? What are you going to do year one, year two, let's say year three? And you parcel out the things that need to be done to the employees. So it's not too much all at once. And people can just chip away at things that need to be done. And it becomes the way they work and very much a part of their culture. There's a lot that's already in place. With a lot of organizations that have been up and running for a while, they might find there's maybe 25 things that they have to work on over the next 3 years. That's not too bad. And organizations that are quite sophisticated might only be 5 or 10. Do you know? But it's something that each and every organization can benefit from, because there's never any end to learning about your own organization and things you can improve upon, but learning from others outside of you and learning from your employees and getting their feedback. There's just, like I said, a treasure trove of information.
Have you had any observations about barriers like resistance to change, where you have to deploy some soft skills? Like, how do I get over that resistance? How do I get buy-in?
Yeah, occasionally there might be a person in the room that's a little bit resistant and they don't want any more on their plate. And so this is where I think distributing the work that needs to be done and getting people to work on the things that they want to work on, individuals or team efforts, and getting them to report back on the progress is what really works really well, because people are proud of the work that they do. They're usually very good results, and they don't mind being celebrated by the rest of their team, and the contribution that they're making. So most of the time, you've got people that are contributing and being celebrated, and it's all working quite well. Now, it's really important that leadership, of course, make sure that these people have time, a little bit of a small percentage of their time to do this work, time to meet, look at progress, and celebrate the good work that's going on. But I'll tell you, leadership also figures out pretty fast. This is like lifting a huge weight off their shoulders when they get everybody engaged and involved in doing things that help strengthen the organization and its performance. And so it's a well-kept secret that shouldn't be, the fact that 80% of the working population doesn't know about excellence models, because this is something that helps each and every leader. Because they're sitting there in their corner office and people are expecting them to have all the answers. It's a lot of pressure on them. And this lightens their load too, right? And if you ask me, learning about an excellence model is like a leadership training and development program, because it really tells you what you should have in place and what you should be working on. So it's a bit of a gift back to leadership, as well as the other people who might be interested in this sort of thing in the organization. Usually leadership and management are pretty interested. The occasional staff person is keen about this too. So it's a good conversation to be having with everybody.
Well, we've run out of time, so hopefully we'll continue this discussion in a couple months. So thank you, Dawn, for this great educational session today. And with that, having said that, everyone have a great rest of your day.